to this story. We'll just roll with it. Why not? Bullwhip effect is started. Let's go over this article from Reuters, and you'll see what I'm referring to. And what's interesting is they talk specifically about the Midwest of the United States as though this is an isolated instance, and I can assure you it's not. What's kind of odd about this story is they recognize the problem, but then they ignore that this is playing out in the rest of the country as well. Let me show you exactly what I'm referring to. We'll do the screen share. And then here we are. Farmers' financial pain spills from Kansas wheat fields to main streets. So they're talking about this specific town in Kansas called Smith Center. And this is June 18th. A tiny town surrounded by miles of rippling wheat fields. Brady Peterson's restaurant sits nearly empty during what should be a Saturday lunch rush. Normally, Pete's would be filled with farmers ordering chicken and cheeseburgers, but as farm income thins, so does Peterson's business. Okay, so the setup here is we've got a small business that is seeing a decline in revenue, a decline in customers, because what's happening is those customers have less and less money to spend. In other words, their purchasing power is declining. We've talked about that a lot lately on this channel, but not just with farmers, with society as a whole. Let's get back to the article. Sluggish sales have slashed his income so much that he can't afford to run his home air conditioner during the baking Kansas summers or pay for a suit to wear to a friend's funeral. As U.S. farm incomes are forecast to plunge in 2024 due to sharp reversal in commodity crop prices, less government support, and high borrowing and labor costs, farmers' economic pain is spreading from the fields to Main Street. So, okay, let's back up here. What's happening is their costs of doing business are increasing and their revenue is declining. How is this different than any other small business out there in the United States if we lump them all together? It's the exact same thing. It's the bullwhip effect. What we do, or what the government, the central planners did, is created these economic distortions by giving all the people, quote unquote, free money, government transfer payments, PPP. And then on top of that, we have asset prices going up and up and up and up, which has allowed us to maintain a certain level of consumption, but not the level to which we had in, let's say, 2021 or 2022. And then the other driver there is, of course, the young people, which, more power to them, are making a lot more money than they were, and their incomes actually exceeded the rate of inflation. But that's just for the demographic 16 to 24. 24 on up, you're screwed. So the people with houses, the people with responsibilities, the people that have to provide for those other people that are making money, the younger people, they're the ones that are really getting pinched. And it's the exact same thing that's happening to the farmers. They're having to shell out more and more and more and more money every single day, but yet the economic distortions that were created during the cerveza sickness, which brought in all of this, basically a financial windfall for them, is no longer there. But what they did is they built their business and their company as if the artificial demand that was created by the economic distortions would continue indefinitely into the future. Now that it hasn't, they're stuck high and dry. And instead of saving all that money that they were making in 2021 and 2022, like they otherwise would have, they spent it on growing their business because they thought, again, that aggregate demand would continue into the future. This is the bullwhip effect playing out in real time all across the Midwest of the United States. And I would argue that it's playing out small and mid-sized businesses across the United States. Let's get back to the article. The situation in U.S. prairie states is particularly severe. Farmers here are facing the worst economic situation in over a decade, and small cities are at risk of becoming ghost towns. So these are the knock-on effects. So you experience the bullwhip with one business, but that business is the tenant of a landlord that owns a commercial building. And that landlord that owns the commercial building owes the bank a mortgage payment every single month. And if he doesn't make that mortgage payment because his business is no longer paying him rent, then what happens to the bank? It creates a hole in their balance sheet. It increases the counterparty risk in the banking system. Therefore, they pull back. They don't take risks. Instead of lending into the real economy, they just go out and buy treasuries. Or they might lend to XYZ corporation, mega corporation, to buy back their shares. But they're not investing that back into the real economy. And therefore, society at large suffers. Business owners noted anywhere from a 20 to 30% decline in revenue compared to previous years. Nationally, farm income is forecast to fall 25% from last year, according to U.S. Ag Department. That would be the largest annual increase in dollar terms ever. We're a farming community, and the farmers just don't have money to spend. But again, this is not just farmers. We're seeing the exact same thing from all of these consumer businesses, from Starbucks, from McDonald's, to Applebee's, to all these other restaurants. I mean, this is the exact same thing we're hearing over and over and over again, except from an ever decreasing amount of businesses that are really just dependent upon the young people, that 16 to 24-year-old age group, or dependent upon the age group or the types of people that actually own assets. U.S. farm income hit a record high in 2022. I wonder why. Would that be because of the cerveza sickness? No, no, no. That would be because of the government's response to the cerveza sickness. Remember, that's the problem. It goes back to the government. If we would have just had the cerveza sickness, go through that thought experiment. Well, let's just assume the government wouldn't have done anything except for just give you as much data as they had and let you make your own decisions. Do you think we would have seen the economic distortions to the degree to which we saw them? Absolutely not. So due to large harvests, South America, I like this, how they blame everything on South America. Right. Let's be very, very clear. The blame lies with the government. Corn, soy, and wheat futures are trading around 3-year lows. It's the boom bust cycle. It's exacerbated by the economic distortions. And what makes matters worse is if this was just a bumper crop, or if they experienced high levels of revenue in 2022, they might not have gone out there and blown all the money on building more capacity. But what they did is they thought that artificial sugar rush would continue. Excuse me. And therefore, they invested as a result. What did that do? Their investments require what? Resources, scarce resources with alternative uses, as Thomas Sowell teaches us. So if those are scarce resources with alternative uses, then by definition, we have malinvestment. We have a misallocation of resources as defined by the Austrian school. And they get this one spot on. So just go back through 2020, 2021, 2022, and think about the degree, the level of misallocation and malinvestment we had throughout our entire economy. And at some point in time, you got to pay the fiddler. Rubber meets the road. And that's usually plays out via the bullwhip effect, which we're seeing play out right now in the Midwest. The mayor of Smith Center, Bryce Wheel, tan farmer, scroggly white-bearded, gruff voice. Okay. He's eating chicken at Pete's. He has described the foreclosures. So we have to look at the ripple effect, the domino effect that happens as a result of some of these key industries closing down. That impacts the smaller businesses, that impacts the real estate, that impacts the banks. He said it's hard to find an industry that doesn't rely on farm products. Well, we can look at the overall U.S. economy, and we can say that it's hard to find an industry that isn't completely reliant on asset prices. And you say, well, George, McDonald's isn't reliant upon asset prices. Oh, yeah, but the economy is. And if the economy tanks, then people are going to have less money, purchasing power to spend at McDonald's. And if the economy itself is dependent upon the asset prices, well, you can come to the conclusion that McDonald's is as well. So just go through that thought experiment. If asset prices go down by 50%, what happens to the U.S. economy? Well, you say, George, you're making a huge assumption there, and that would be true of any economy. No, it wouldn't. Because you can come right over here to go to Argentina. What happens if asset prices go down there by 50%? Zero. Nothing. Because although I'm not saying their economy is better than the United States, but I'm saying it isn't dependent upon asset prices. It's very similar to the United States back in the 1960s. We were not dependent upon asset prices back then. The stock market could have gone down by 50%, and people probably wouldn't even have known about it. Now, if the stock market goes down by 50%, it's not only a crisis in the United States, it's most likely a global crisis. While the broader U.S. economy is growing strong. See, this is one of the main reasons I wanted to go over this article in particular. While the broader U.S. economy is growing strong, how do you figure? Like, what leads you to that conclusion? Because the unemployment rate has gone from 3.4% up to 4%, and because 4 is technically still very low? Other than the stock market, and not even the stock market, because if you look at the group of stocks that is the market, most of them are down. So what they're doing is basically they're looking at NVIDIA and they're looking at the unemployment rate and coming to the conclusion that the economy is strong, instead of looking at what's happening in the Midwest and kind of scratching their head saying, I wonder if small businesses in other areas and industry in other areas are experiencing the exact same thing. Or maybe a better question is, why wouldn't industry and small businesses in other areas be experiencing the exact same thing? I think the answer is the professional economists don't realize, or would never ever admit, that the problems, or what created the problems to begin with, was the economic distortion. See, they look at this and say, oh, well, their problem was that grain prices were really volatile. Okay, well, why were the grain prices volatile? It's because of the central planners. And so you look at all these other industries that aren't applicable to the Midwest. You say, well, their demand, was that not volatile? You don't think that they've seen their demand slow down substantially since 2022? Of course. But then they would have to look themselves in the mirror and admit that their degree in Keynesian economics is completely worthless. Because at the end of the day, it's not about the government, it's about the private sector. And the answer to the problems in the private sector is not government spending. It's not bigger government. That's never the solution. That's always the core of the actual problem. But the punchline here, guys, is that we're seeing this play out in the Midwest. They're at least admitting to it. But in my view, if it's playing out there, I don't know why it wouldn't play out in other areas. And I think it actually is. It just hasn't hit the headlines yet. But my base case is that it will start to hit the headlines in the months to come. We'll have to wait and see how it plays out. As always, guys, make sure that you're standing up for freedom, liberty, free market capitalism. We'll see you in the next video.